the Justice Department. Last year, we made critical investments and down payments in your department, and I look forward to hearing from you about how the resources we provided will support the important work across the Justice Department, as well as how these investments are making our communities safer in this country. The mission of the Justice Department is vast and broad. There is no shortage of topics I know we will discuss here today: enforcing and upholding the rule of law, supporting state, local, tribal law enforcement, combating drug trafficking networks to keep dangerous narcotics out of our communities, defense of our national security, and mitigation of emerging foreign and domestic threats, including cyber threats. I know we'll also hear of the critical tasks the department is carrying out, including preservation of civil liberties and support for free and fair elections, protection of vulnerable populations exposed to domestic and community violence, safeguarding our commerce and our economy. DOJ also administers a massive, complex detention and correction enterprise. It occupies a big part of its budget. DOJ adjudicates immigration benefits and oversees a broad and sophisticated criminal investigative and prosecutorial system. To carry out the department's broad missions I just mentioned, your FY 2024 budget request seeks $39.7 billion in discretionary funding, about 6% above the previous enacted level. While I know there are voices making noise about reducing funding levels across the non-defense agencies like DOJ, I don't think Congress can ignore some of the challenges we are facing in our communities back home. And I echo the concern of the chairman about the record number of deaths due to the opioid epidemic, as well as increases in crime and gun violence. Congress needs to continue to build on those investments we made last year to the COPS hiring program and increases to our federal law enforcement to provide them the necessary tools to face these existing and emerging challenges. Further, we need to sustain critical grant programs such as those under the Office on Violence Against Women to address the so-called shadow pandemic of domestic and partner violence, which did surge globally during the COVID-19 pandemic. Congress authorized new programs under the 2023 Violence Against Women Act reauthorization, and I look forward to seeing the continuation of those programs in FY 2024. Attorney General Garland, you have a big job that is only getting bigger all the time. So once again, welcome, and I look forward to your testimony and working with you on how we can best invest in fiscal year 2024. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Mr. Attorney General, you're recognized for an opening statement. Without objection, your written statement will be entered into the record. I would ask that you try to keep your statement to 5 minutes so that we can have additional time for questions. You're now recognized. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Rogers, Ranking Member Cartwright, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to discuss the Justice Department's funding request for fiscal year 2024. Every day, the Justice Department works to keep our country safe from all threats, foreign and domestic. We work to protect the civil rights of everyone in our country, and every day in everything we do, we work to uphold the rule of law that is the foundation of our system of government. The Justice Department's budget request seeks the resources we need to continue and expand our work. To help keep our country safe, we are requesting more than $21.3 billion to sustain and expand the capacities of the FBI, DEA, ATF, and United States Marshal Service, as well as the offices of the United States Attorneys. These resources will help protect communities across the country. They will strengthen our efforts to counter the threats posed by hostile nation states, specifically the People's Republic of China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. They will give us the resources we need to counter foreign and domestic terrorism, and they will sustain and expand our whole-of-government approach to combating violent crime, the epidemic of gun violence, and the scourge of drug trafficking. The department is also seeking $2.7 billion for our Office of Community-Oriented Policing Services, the COPS Office, hiring program. This funding will enable us to help our state and local law enforcement agency partners to hire more full-time law enforcement professionals. As part of our efforts to disrupt drug trafficking, our budget requests $3.3 billion for DEA's investigations, diversion control, and counter-drug efforts across 241 domestic offices and 92 foreign offices in 69 countries around the world. The department is focused on getting deadly fentanyl out of our communities and combating the violent cartels that are putting it there. Just last week, DEA issued an alert warning about the emerging threat posed by the deadly combination of fentanyl and xylazine, which increases the risk of fatal drug poisoning. We also know that addressing the proliferation of deadly drugs requires more than just enforcement actions. So we are requesting more than $646 million for grants to help address the drug overdose epidemic and the public health challenges of addiction and drug use. The department's budget also requests significant investments in our efforts to combat economic crimes, protect the health, safety, and financial security of American consumers, and safeguard competition. This includes $770 million for our U.S. Attorney's offices to pursue investigations and prosecutions of complex economic crimes. And these include COVID-19 related fraud schemes that have targeted individuals and exploited the pandemic and stolen taxpayer dollars. Protecting civil rights was a founding purpose of the department in 1870, and it remains our urgent charge today. The department's budget requests significant investments to advance that work. This includes our efforts to protect voting rights, to combat hate crimes, to foster trust and accountability in law enforcement, to defend federally protected reproductive rights, and to advance environmental justice and tackle the climate crisis. Specifically, we are requesting a total of $251.6 million for the Civil Rights Division to carry out its important mission. We are also requesting $127.6 million to support the FBI's investigations of civil rights violations. Administering just immigration courts and correctional systems is another important area of departmental focus for which we are requesting additional resources. We are requesting $1.46 billion, a 69.2% increase for the Executive Office for Immigration Review to hire nearly 1,000 new staff. This includes 150 new immigration judge teams. These resources will support our efforts to apply the immigration laws justly and efficiently. We are also seeking $8.82 billion in funding for the Bureau of Prisons. These resources will help ensure the health, safety, and well-being of correctional staff and incarcerated individuals. They will help ensure transparency, accountability, and effective oversight of all federal prison and of detention centers. And they will enable the department to fully implement the provisions of the First Step Act and increase programming to prepare individuals in federal prisons for successful reentry. I'm extremely proud of the work the department's employees are doing to uphold the rule of law, to keep our country safe, and to protect civil rights. I respectfully ask for your support for the President's FY 2024 funding requests so that we may continue and build upon that work. Thank you very much.
Under the 5-minute rule, with questions for the witness, I'll begin by recognizing myself. Synthetic opioids, such as fentanyl, remain the primary driver of the increase in overdose deaths. In my home state of Kentucky, for example, more than 2,200 people died from drug overdoses in 2021. Nationwide, more than 107,000 lost their lives, increasing every day and every year. The department's budget submission has listed combating drug trafficking and preventing overdose deaths as a top priority. With that in mind, how can the department claim to be prioritizing the war on drugs when your budget submission for fiscal '24 only requests 4 additional DEA agents.
What in the
The
world
nation's
are you going
primary
to be
drug-fighting
paying those
organization,
people? Are you
DEA,
going to be
Drug
paying them
Enforcement
like
Administration,
whatever a quarter of $2
with
billion
thousands of
is?
employees
I don't know.
in the
I
face
just
of
want to
this
know if the
overwhelming
little guy next to
epidemic
me
that we're up
pick
against
some of
with
the
fentanyl
pages out of my pack,
poison.
then maybe I'd be able to
You only
read
asked for
about
4
this and
additional
find
agents
out. But what? How
and a
are you going to
reduction
pay these
in
people?
program funding for the Organized Crime and Drug
Yeah, why
Enforcement
isn't the
Task
war
Forces.
on drugs something that
Our
we're
cities are
gonna
afire
fight anymore? I enjoyed
with
the war on
violence and
drugs. I thought it was very entertaining.
illegality,
That's him.
flooded with killer drugs,
Killer drugs.
and you not
Killer
only
drugs.
don't ask
You
for
know what?
more
I
help
want
for
some killer drugs.
DEA agents, but you're
Not
actually
killer drugs. I don't want to kill.
promoting a reduction
I
in
don't think he
funding
knows what killer means.
for the Organized Crime and
Dude,
Drug Enforcement Task
he's
Force.
probably younger than I am.
That
No,
I can't fathom.
probably not.
If we were to approve
Good
your
morning.
budget
I'm sorry.
submission
Good
as is,
morning. Good morning. Good
the
morning.
Organized Crime and Drug Enforcement Task Forces would lose
Good morning.
$25 billion in
Good
funding
morning.
and
Do
70 task force
we're
agents.
in our places.
And
We
instead, the
play
department would
Chinese.
gain
It's
nearly $45
the
million
way we start
for
off
zero-emission
today.
electric vehicles,
Ooh, that was a blue note.
cars. Does that sound like the budget request for a department that's prioritizing the war on drugs? I don't
Well,
think
no,
so.
it's yes, actually.
Today, the
Oh,
DEA
we're not prioritizing the war. Well, maybe
has
we are.
identified
Maybe there's
Mexican drug
multiple war crimes.
cartels
Did you ever think of that?
as largely responsible
Cotton tip head,
for the production
the
of
Q-tip
U.S.
head that you
consumed
have there.
fentanyl
Like I could just
using
put you in my ear
China-sourced
and you would
primary
pull out all
precursor
kinds of ink.
chemicals. How is the department
Your
addressing
big
and
Q-tip, you wouldn't quite
prioritizing
fit.
the
You're like a jumbo
China-Mexico
Q-tip.
cartel's U.S.
Are there jumbo
drug
Q-tips?
trafficking pathway?
If there are, this dude's it.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman. I am a former narcotics and violent crime prosecutor. I am very well aware of this problem. The very first thing I did when I came into the Justice Department was to create a violent crime strategy because of the enormous
Hell yes,
increase we
Camus.
saw in
Hell
2020.
yes.
And therefore, and I have met personally with the families of the victims of the fentanyl crisis. So I'm personally charged with this problem. We are seeking an increase of $342.8 million, a 3.4% increase across Justice Department.
Good morning,
counter drug
Ted.
trafficking. Total
Ted, I say good
$10.4
morning to you.
billion.
I say
The
good
budget
morning,
math and the
Ted, to
actual
you.
math doesn't
It's
always
Wednesday.
match up.
It's Wednesday.
So
It's
the
Wednesday.
actual number
And that
of
means the
agents that
week
we
is
are
almost
requesting
over.
are 131,
But
not
maybe
4.
somebody
The
hates the
reason for the
weekend.
difference in the
I don't know,
numbers
it could
is
happen.
that
'Cause
FY
sometimes the
'23
weekend is
budget,
not
which
your
only became
weekend.
effective
Sometimes
recently, had
Tuesday and Wednesday is your
127.
weekend, in which
We're
case
adding
this
an
is your
additional
fun
4,
day.
and the
Oh,
funding for FY
good
'24
morning.
will fund the total number into FY '24. In addition, we're seeking 50 diversion investigators and 35 analysts. So the actual total of drug fighting positions we're asking to add to the DEA is 216. OCDF, we're not cutting, we're keeping the same amount in OCDF, $550.5 million. I also want to make clear that with respect to violent crime overall, we are asking for a $1.4 billion increase over last year. This includes increases for the U.S. Attorney's offices, for the DEA, for ATF, FBI, and the Marshal Service, and also particularly important, the way we believe we need to fight both the drug problem and the violent crime problem is in partnership with our state and local partners. So we're asking for a $3.7 billion increase in the grants that we can give for cops hiring, for the Burn JAG, for the new gun crime prevention initiative, so that we can effectively partner in task forces with our state and local partners who are the boots on the ground in the war against both narcotics and violent crime. I want to be clear, this is an extraordinarily high priority for the Justice Department.
What are we doing to intercept or prevent the shipment of the precursor chemicals from China, exclusively from
Yeah,
China,
what are we doing about
through the
it?
cartels in Mexico and into
Is
the
that,
U.S.?
who
What are
cares
we
about that
doing
now?
to curtail the Chinese from forwarding this stuff here?
Mr. Chairman, you put your finger
Okay,
on an
we
enormous
need to
problem,
stop
which is
drinking in the
exactly what you
morning,
said.
okay,
Chinese precursor
Congressman?
companies are going
I'm
into
just gonna
Mexico
suggest that
and made
we
into
put the
fentanyl, either
maker's mark
powder
down,
or pills
we
there.
don't tipple it in
So
our
we're
thermos,
attacking this in several ways.
and
First of all, I'm
we do our
personally gone to
jobs.
Mexico twice to meet with the President of Mexico and with the Attorney General and with the security ministers there. I've met with them all again in the United States several times, trying to press them to cut off these precursors. Together with the Treasury Department, our government has sanctioned some of the precursor companies that we can find in Mexico. We will, as we did with respect to the the Russian oligarchs in Ukraine, we will seize and freeze and forfeit their materials when we find them. So we are doing an enormous amount, I think, to try to cut off this flow, which you are correct in describing as being the ultimate source of our problem.
Mr. Cartwright?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Attorney General, as I mentioned in my opening statement, there are voices on Capitol Hill calling for capping fiscal year 2024 spending levels at the fiscal year 2022 level, essentially a 22% cut
You know, at
below
one
the
point,
enacted level last
this
year.
Cartwright dude,
We
he
sent
was
a
probably a
letter
cool
to
kid.
your department
Remember, you know, like he
asking
was
for what
trying to
that would
get a
mean
girl
for
or a
for
guy.
what you're up
He
to
was
in the
trying
department.
to,
And we got
you
a
know,
letter dated March
get
18
a
back from your department,
get a,
which I would
I
ask
don't know if he was
unanimous
a CD
consent to
guy or
enter
a
that
record
letter
guy
into
or
the
what.
record, Mr. Chairman.
He was just out there playing music.
And you responded, and I want to
You know
say I'm
what? I mean, there's
concerned
probably
by
like
some of the
cool
impacts
aspects to this
highlighted
dude.
in the letter, picking up
Why do
on
they get
the
to the
train
point?
of
I don't know
thought
about this dude. I don't know him
Chairman Rogers
anybody, but
was
why do they get to
working
the
on.
point of being
I'm looking at
so hell bent
cuts to the
on
comprehensive
preventing
opioid
people from having
stimulant and
civil rights and
substance use
shit?
program would see a
Because they're not
reduction of
getting paid off directly,
$40.7 million.
right? They're not getting paid off
The
directly
drug
by
treatment
people
courts
like
would see a
me
reduction of
here, Teal.
$19.4 million.
Rip, good morning,
The
Rip. How are the
victims,
parrots?
let's
How are
see,
the parrots, my darling Rip?
uh,
My Valentine.
In fact, 22%
My
reduction
Valentine has
overall
been
would mean
traveling the
a
world
lot of
since that
things,
time.
starting with the war on
Can't keep a
opioids,
good
but
man down.
extending to so many other things. And I want to
I have to
ask,
share my Valentine with the
what are some
world.
of your biggest
Well, the
concerns
world's
as
parrots,
relates
anyway.
to 22% cut in what you got last year?
Well, to start off with the questions that the chairman asked me, it would be devastating for our efforts to combat drug trafficking. Totally devastating. Lead to a $620 million reduction in base resources for the DEA. It would lead to a 28% reduction of the workforces in a single year of the U.S. Attorney's offices. These are the offices that bring the drug prosecutions and the violent crime prosecutions. It would lead to a loss of 11,000 positions at the FBI. At the Marshal Service, it would lead to our inability to replace 221 Deputy U.S. Marshals who are responsible, in addition to judicial protection, to fugitive task forces to find the people who we have arrest warrants on. And it would lead to enormous cuts in our COPS office and in our burn JAG grants. The consequence would be truly devastating to our efforts to fight violent crime and to our efforts to fight the drug traffickers.
Well, you mentioned COPS hiring program and the burn justice assistance grants. If those get cut by 22%, who gets hurt, Attorney General?
Well, those people who are hurt are the state and local. Well, there's a direct and indirect. The direct effect is we're not able to give the money to the state and local police departments. The ultimate effect is the communities that are plagued by fentanyl, the communities that are plagued by violent crime, because this money goes to state and local law enforcement for their own work against violent crime and drug trafficking, and to their work with us in task forces to attack both of those.
Sure, the COPS hiring program is federal assistance so that local municipalities that are strapped for cash to begin with right now can take federal money and use that toward the hiring of additional police officers. Is that correct?
That's right.
Well, if we were to absorb a cut of 22% to that program, how long would it take those local municipalities to recover from such a cut?
And we're estimating 300 to 400 fewer law enforcement funded positions as a consequence of a reduction of 50 millions just in the cop hiring program. In the Burn JAG, the awards to local governments would be reduced by an average of 30,000. State awards $1 million per state. I can't estimate how long it would take for them to recover from that, but they may never be able to recover from that. That requires state funding to make up for that. And whether the states are capable of providing that funds, I don't know. I assume that they're not, otherwise they wouldn't be relying on federal funds.
Well, the chairman mentioned an increase in crime in this country over the last year. And of course, a lot of that has to do with the end of the pandemic and people being out and about more. But the truth is, it doesn't matter. If there's an increase in crime, no matter what the reason, we need to fight it. And the question is our ability to fight crime
But
going
you
to
know
be
what else we
increased
do,
or
Mr.
decreased if
Cartwright?
we
We
have a
fight the
decrease of
reasons that
22%
crime
in your budget?
happens. Isn't that
Drastically
interesting?
decreased.
Because if we fight the
Thank you, Mr.
reasons
Chairman. I
that
yield
crime
back.
happens, then you can mitigate the amount
Thank you,
of
Mr.
crime
Chairman.
that will ultimately happen.
I'm
Isn't that
listening with
interesting
interest
how
to the
that works?
comments of the gentleman from Pennsylvania.
There's this
I'm
thing
glad that
you should
he
hear about. It's called
got a
the school to
response, the
prison
minority got a
pipeline.
response to their letter.
Very interesting.
I also sit on
A lot of
judiciary,
people.
and
Maybe
my
one of your
chairman,
staff
Mr.
could
Jordan,
brief you.
has asked me to ask you about a letter he sent back in
Oh, for
January, asking
fucking
you to
sake,
appear before his
wait.
committee. He has not gotten a response to that letter. And so I'd ask you, can I get a commitment from you to respond to him in the immediate future with
I think
several
you already
dates
did. It was a
that
big
would
fuck
be
no.
during which you would
Fuck
be available
you.
to
Of course
appear
I'm
before
gonna
the
appear
Judiciary
Fuck you,
Committee.
Of
Jordan.
course, I'm going to appear before the House Judiciary Committee. I understand there are discussions about scheduling that have been going on. I don't think there's any problem in that respect.
There's been no response to the letter, so I think there's some question about whether
Oh,
you
you
would
think
be
you got
willing
balls
to
enough
appear.
for
So
this,
getting your
Klein?
commitment to appear is helpful, and I think
Come on, baby.
More than willing.
Pull your balls up.
I listened with interest to your statement, and I'm
Who you stumping
kind
for?
of quite incredulous that you would talk about
Whose ball sack
the
are you
rule of
carrying?
law when your department and so many in your department have done so much to undermine the rule of law.
Yeah, all the Trump appointees.
I want to ask,
Let's talk about it. Dude, I got
internal
people I can
communications
talk to
show
you
that the
about.
DOJ and the National School
Start with
Boards
Jeffrey
Association
Clark.
extensively colluded prior to your memorandum back on October 4th of 2021, which inserted federal law enforcement into local school board meetings.
That is not true.
In fact, you
because
previously
don't
testified to the House
understand
Judiciary
that
Committee that the
people
sole
were
basis for your
being
memorandum was the
threatened.
NSBA letter sent to President Biden back on
telling
September 29th,
you
2021, only 5 days earlier.
that
Is that correct?
they were doing the right thing, and
It's
in fact, I
not
think
correct that
they
was
should
the
have
sole
done
basis,
more
and
to
that wasn't my
protect the people on
testimony.
the
My
school boards
testimony was
and
that
the
it was an
staff of
important
the
basis, in addition to seeing many, many, many
school.
reports in the news of threats of violence and
Yeah.
violence
Hello.
in the preceding
Actual,
period.
real threats of
On
violence.
October 20th,
So
2021, the
listen,
FBI's
lying
counterterrorism and
face.
criminal divisions operationalized your directive, announcing to all FBI special agents in charge the creation of a new threat tag, Edu Officials, to track school board-related threats. Is that
Dude,
correct?
let's tell this guy about
So
grassroots,
this is an
or
internal
not grassroots,
FBI
but astroturfing.
operational
Maybe we should have a conversation
working.
about
I didn't know about it
astroturfing.
at the time. I've seen it
Sorry,
now.
I don't mean to talk over,
All it is,
but
from what I've read of the FBI's own testimony, is that when a particular kind of person is, when there's a threat against a particular kind of person, there's a particular kind of tag put on the information. So if it's
it's
a threat
called
against
good
an
data
education
management.
official,
You should look it up,
it's put on
Klein.
education. If it's a threat against a Supreme Court justice, it's SCOTUS, SCOTUS. The tags don't mean anything other than a way to track how many
Yes,
threats of this
arrest
kind
Chris
are
Ray, fire
aimed
Chris
at
Ray,
particular
get rid
kinds
of
of
Chris
people,
Ray,
so the
retire Chris
FBI can
Ray.
figure out whether this is a serious
Although I think
problem
he
or
has
not
his
a
hands are
serious
dirty.
Do
That's
you
my
know how many
He can't just be fired and thrown
citizens
away.
were tagged with this threat?
Yeah, people who were
I
threatening
don't
people were
know. I
tagged
think the
with the threat.
FBI
Jesus
returned that there
Christ,
were,
Klein, what don't you get about
in
the
their
way
own
this works?
subpoena response to Mr. Jordan, I think there were around 20 as to whom what are called guardians were attached to for further investigation. Yeah.
22
They're
to be
individuals who
exact,
made threats.
and 6
Bitch.
were actually investigated by the Counterterrorism Division
Yeah, because they were
of the
fucking
FBI.
making significant
Citizens
threats.
of
I
this
don't know,
country
did
who
you
were
not watch
trying to
those
make their
school board
voices
meetings?
heard at
'Cause I
their
really
school
did
board
watch
meetings,
those school board
and
meetings.
instead
Those were
were
intensely
tagged by
frightening.
the FBI as
And as a former
terrorists
school
by
administrator, I think I would have been
agents of this
terrified.
government seeking to
So fuck this
silence their
guy.
voices.
Fuck all the
When it was
Republicans or
discovered eventually
anybody who
that this
thinks
was
that it was
not the national
okay to
threat
do what
that
they did in
the
school
Biden
boards.
administration or the
Fuck
School Boards
you.
Association wanted it to be, why didn't you withdraw the memo?
So let me be clear about the memo. The memo was aimed at violence and threats of violence. It was not aimed at parents protesting to their school boards. In fact, it was very clear in the second sentence that that is constitutionally protected. The thing that is not constitutionally protected are threats of violence and violence. The memo was not aimed at parents in any respect. It was aimed at violence and threats of violence against school administrators and teachers and
And yet,
other
after it
personnel.
was determined that this was not a national threat, you refused to withdraw the memo, and the agents of the FBI continued to
Well,
act
the
as
memo
if
was
your
still
memo
true.
were still in
You don't
force and
withdraw a
still in
memo that
effect.
isn't
So,
false.
would
It's
you
true.
agree that you
Listen, Klein,
just
you're
continue to
not holding the same water.
put
Look at how
forward this
small his
false
hands are.
rhetoric
Why are all
to
their
your
hands
agents
so
that
small?
was not
Guess
corrected
how?
and resulted
22.
in the
22
uh,
Nimrods.
investigation of hardworking American citizens just wanting to have their voices heard at the ridiculous indoctrination going on in their school boards?
The investigations were not aimed at hardworking individuals who were just trying to protest about
The documents you
education.
provided show that they were the opening of six investigations in your
Yeah,
counterterrorism
My
because
division.
there's some
understanding is that
pretty
there were no
sketchy
full-field
fuckers
investigations
involved in
opened.
that
All
shit
of
who
them,
weren't
all of
actually
them were in
parents
the
per
end
se. So
referred to state and local.
Exactly, where they should have been in the first place. It's
that was-
clearly a state and local issue, should never have started, and I yield back.
okay, now do you feel good? You feel good? You
Riley?
all done? Did you achieve greatness?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Attorney General, for being here. As we've been discussing today, the Department of Justice's ability to achieve its public safety mission will be severely hampered by reducing funding to fiscal year '22 enacted levels. A number of my colleagues have pointed out the impact on various aspects of the department. I wanted to just focus, if I can, for a moment on the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco,
Point,
Firearms,
Gal.
and
Gal
Explosives in
nailed it.
particular. ATF plays a key role in addressing
Another thing,
gun
gentlemen,
violence crisis in our
this
nation.
shade of
It's
blue,
the only
this
federal
like
agency
steel
that I'm
blue
aware that ensures
thing
gun
going on
dealers
here.
and manufacturers
Let
are
me just
following federal law
use my
and is
pointer.
uniquely positioned
This
to
blue
investigate
here
and prevent firearms
is a
trafficking.
no.
However, for
It's gonna be
years,
a no for
ATF
me.
has
For
been
soup
starved of
color.
resources
I know,
and
it's saucy.
understaffed.
This is definitely
Although its
a no.
goal is to
I don't
inspect
understand.
each
I'm
license
done
holder
with this
once every
light
5
gray
years,
or
a
the
recent
oatmeal.
report
Oatmeal's okay.
indicated the
This is
ATF
no.
only inspects around 7%
I don't know what's going on
of
here.
federal
This is not a
firearm
good idea.
license each
This
year, making it virtually impossible
somehow
to ensure
he thought
dealers
this
are
was
maintaining
spicy
compliance with even the most
and kind
basic
of
requirements. Can
OOTD
you just
worthy.
comment, sir, on the
This is
effect that
disgusting.
cuts to
This
the
looks like
agency would have on its ability to properly
my
inspect
cat barfed that up.
gun dealers?
This, no.
Well,
This is great.
the
This
ATF has
guy cuts
two
a suit, man. He knows.
obligations.
He knows the
One
tie
is directly
combo.
fighting violent
His
crime
hair
through
is
their work
trim,
in
but not too
tracing
trim. It's a little bit of a wild side. You know, he's got a
guns
little
at
wild
crime
side.
scenes, ballistics with
Showing
respect to
that
crime
ring because
scenes,
man, he's
participating
telling
in
his wife,
the
"I love you, honey,
anti-trafficking
every
task
minute of
forces.
every day."
And then the other
There's
side
that
of their
prayer
obligations
right now.
are
That's
the
so
ones that
great.
you've
I
also
love this.
described with respect to inspecting gun dealers, to ensure that the rules that Congress has passed about who's prohibited from holding a gun, former felons, for example, are enforced. And the consequence of the cuts to the ATF would be extraordinary. A loss of 190 agents.
So there you
which
go,
would
kids.
include
Every
130
time someone
industry
comes at you
operation
with
investigators
the
and
DOJ
180
targeted
technical staff.
parents,
That would
you'll say
eliminate all state and local
22,
training
and
that the
even
ATF does at the
6
National
of those
Center for
were really looked
Explosives
into
Training.
seriously.
To
So
increase the
yeah,
amount of
just
time
say
necessary
22,
to trace a gun found
if
at a
that.
crime scene
That's your
more than
response.
2 months. But by eliminating the 130 industry operations investigators that you're talking about, it would make it completely impossible to make the kinds of inspections every 5 years.
Come on, easily.
Would you support increased funding to ensure that ATF has the resources to both train and hire enough staff to oversee the industry?
Yes, and that is included within our, I'm trying
Yeah,
to find the
here's my
exact amount
budget
that we've
page.
asked for in addition for the ATF. The request we've asked for, so this comes under the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, and so we've asked for, which was passed last year. So we've asked for an increase of $71.1 million, which would include funding for these purposes.
I want to just stay on the same subject just for the moment. The National Tracing Center of ATF establishes chain of custody of firearms recovered in crimes, providing investigative leads, federal, state, and local agencies as they work to solve firearms crimes and collect intelligence about trafficking, as I understand it. Can you discuss the impact that proposed cuts to the agency would have on the time it takes to trace guns at the center?
I don't know the exact amount of time that it would take, but obviously with that many fewer people available to do the tracing at the center, it would take enormously, a longer amount of time. I think the specific thing that I cited was 2 months for tracing. So I'm not sure whether that answers the question that you're asking, but I think this is exactly the question that you were asking. It would increase by 2 months the amount of time at the National Tracing Center.
Very good, which would obviously severely hamper investigations.
Yes.
I want to just, with the remaining few seconds I have, I represent Rochester, New York, in the midst of devastating cycle of gun violence. The number of homicides in 2021 was a record high of 84. Last year, nearly the same amount. And I've asked for the department to prioritize firearm prosecutions and organize enhanced collaborations between state and local partners. In May of '21, the department announced the comprehensive strategy for reducing violent crime, initiatives like the Standing Violent Crime Reduction Steering Committee, directing U.S. attorneys to develop comprehensive strategies. Can you just provide an update on the strategy and resources that are needed to further your efforts?
Yeah, so what you're referring to particularly is the memo that I issued soon after I came into the department. I'm happy to talk generally about our strategy. I'll point out for your purposes for Rochester. Rochester is now, was announced last July, will be one of the grant recipients for the Project Safe Neighborhoods program. And also at the same time, it'll be one of the new sites for the National Public Safety Partnerships.
Thank you so. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know if you can comment further. I don't want to. I wanted to yield back because I see the balance of my time has expired.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Mr. Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Attorney General, for being here today. I want to just talk real quick about patriotism. It's something that has driven me personally. Patriotism compels us to love our country, right? It compels us to want security for our country. It wants us to, as a nation, be dominant on the global stage and with peace and tranquility within our borders. Patriotism, however, it doesn't require us to trust our government. That is earned, and that is only earned after a track record of performance and citizens actually witnessing their government working for them,
So
not
this
for
guy,
themselves. And I
is he
think
on the
of all agencies right now, the Department of
I don't
Justice,
know all
the
my
new head
representatives, I'm
has
sorry.
got a brand name problem, has a trust issue with the
Really?
American
You know what
people.
they do? They
Several
do, you're right, and let's talk about
encroachments
it. You
over the
want to
last
hear
few
it come
years,
from?
the
It comes from Bill
weaponization of the
Barr.
Justice
Yep,
Department,
that's right. All the way
FISA
back to Five
issues that
Nights
go
at
back
Freddy's
several
himself, Bill
years.
Barr.
And for me personally, when
That's
I'm
what it
in
is.
meetings like this and I hear the Attorney
Mm-hmm.
General for the Department of Justice
Mm-hmm.
qualify justice with
Yeah,
terms like
let's talk about
environmental
it. You know what?
justice,
Bill Barr
social
should be
justice,
here.
climate
That's a great
justice,
idea. Somebody call
racial
Five Nights at
justice, whether
Freddy's
it's in
and
the
see
written
if we can
testimony or
send him
verbal,
over.
the hair on
Plug
the
him.
back of my neck stands up because
That works.
anytime
Now
you put a word in
I've
front
already
of the
achieved my
word
Opus
justice,
Dei
you're diluting justice. And you're actually putting a finger
theme for the
inadvertently on
day.
the scales of justice, and it
Bill Barr's
changes
name has been
the
invoked,
paradigm of our country
hence
from one
Opus
that is
Dei.
guaranteeing
Oh,
equality to one
bingo.
that starts searching for equity. And in the Constitution, equality is guaranteed, not equity. So I want to start there because I think that's very important to understand that you do have a brand name issue right now and a trust issue with the American people. And it's going to come to a head in the form of this FISA conversation that's going to be happening here in the near term No mention of it here today in your oral
Yeah, let's talk
testimony,
about
nothing as
Carter
far as I can
Page.
see
That's
in
a
the written
great idea.
testimony.
I would
But as
love
you
to
know,
talk about
FISA is
Carter
coming
Page, too.
to expire
Fantastic.
before the end of this year, if I'm not mistaken. And right now, I don't believe that the majority of Congress, and it may be a very slim percentage of Congress that actually supports a renewal of FISA. And I sit on the Intel Committee. I understand why we have FISA, what we use it for, what value it brings to our nation's security. And I still don't trust the Department of Justice, the FBI, and other federal agencies to use FISA in accordance with what it is intended for, and that is to keep Americans safe and not to comment on the fentanyl discussion, because that's been the front and center focus of this so far. I appreciate you going to Mexico. I appreciate you attempting to put sanctions on the Mexican companies that are partaking in the precursor development. But until we, the collective we, Congress, Secretary of State, Treasurer, Commerce, Justice, President, put a finger in the chest of China and go after the companies in China that are developing the precursor materials there before they get on a slow boat to Mexico and across our borders. 300 people will die of fentanyl today, and I would submit that the crisis at our southern border is by far the #1 national security crisis that we have. Its origins are in China. The route is through Mexico and across our border. It's fully characterized. We all know that. And 300 people today will die because we are doing nothing about it. It's you, it's the DEA. Everything we have done has failed. Okay, so we need this administration to recognize that the fentanyl crisis,
Excuse
not
me,
climate
sir.
change, is the closest
Excuse me.
alligator to the
Excuse me.
canoe killing Americans right now.
I
But I
don't.
would love for you to talk to us about FISA
Oh,
and
yeah,
how
we got
you're
the
going to
fentanyl fix.
reinstill
Hells
confidence from
yeah.
Americans in the Department of
Crazy
Justice
Ivan comes
so that we
here
can have
every
all the
day for
tools
his
available to
fentanyl
you so you
fix,
can
but his
actually ensure
fentanyl
this
fix
country's
through
security
congressional hearings.
and
Hells
do
yeah,
what's right
that's the way to get
in
your
accordance with the
fentanyl.
Constitution.
I'll take
So,
my
giving
fentanyl
me a
through a
lot to unpack
congressional
here. Let's
hearing.
begin with where
Thank
you started,
you.
with patriotism. I have devoted virtually my entire public life, my
Oh, yeah,
entire life
having
as an adult,
babies.
to public service. I have done it on the streets of Washington, D.C., facing drug traffickers, including murderers. I have done it in the Justice Department, facing across the
He
table
is
someone who'd
pissed.
killed more than 160 people in a bombing. I've done it repeatedly in that respect, and I spent almost 25 years ensuring the rule of law as a judge.
And I want to be clear, I'm not questioning your patriotism, sir. I
Don't
respect
you
your service. I
fucking
appreciate your
interrupt
service.
him
What
at
I'm trying to
all.
impart is that
fuck.
patriots are not compelled to
The
trust their
fuck.
government.
Absolutely
And
not.
the citizens that we
Fuck
work
you.
for want
Fuck
to earn,
you.
want us to
Oh
earn
my
that trust from them.
God.
I
Do you
completely
understand who
agree
would
with
fill
that.
our head in the government? Do you
And
understand?
that's why I gave up
I
the
want all
bench to
these
come to the
guys to
Justice
face some kind of
Department,
comeuppance.
try
I'm
to
sorry, I
reinstill
said
trust
it.
in the Justice
I want all these
Department and
guys,
in our
even the ones
government.
who are just
It's
spouting.
why
the
I've
bullshit. I'm sorry,
reinstilled the
shut up.
norms of the department of treating like cases alike, of keeping partisanship out of the department, of ensuring that partisanship and improper influences don't affect our criminal investigations. That's all part of what I've been trying to do, and that's the whole reason I gave up a life tenure. Now, let me focus on 702.
Kayaks.
702, first time I was in the Justice Department, we had
Get with the
plain FISA. I'm
90s.
just going to call it plain FISA. We did not have 702. That was passed by the Congress after 9/11 while I was in the court. When I came, I didn't know what 702 exactly did. I've now found every morning at my all threats briefing provided by the FBI and the Intelligence Committee that an extraordinarily large percentage of the intelligence we get comes from 702. This is what we need
Comes
in
from
order to fight
Lolo
the
sending
Chinese,
stupid
particularly.
tips and
Getting
tagging us in their
information
Twitters.
about their cyber attacks, about their efforts to exfiltrate information, about their efforts to export our military information, our computer science, our advanced technologies, about their efforts to control dissidents who have fled China and are in the United States. That's just one small sliver of it, but since you're particularly asking about China, the consequences of removing 702 is not going
Good
to
morning,
punish the Justice
Tom. How are
Department.
you?
It's going to punish the
Timers. Tom
American
comes
people
in
in the most
on a
direct
low note.
way possible. That includes the threats we get from Iran, the threats we get from Russia, the threats we get from North Korea. But I totally agree with you. We need the trust of the American people on this. And that is why one of the first things I did when I came into the Justice
We're
Department
getting
and
there easily.
received
We're totally
the
getting there.
so-called
I
702
believe. I
reports
believe we
about the
can fly.
non-compliance incidents. I'm
I
certainly
believe we
very
can
familiar with those.
just indict.
Issue a memorandum to the
Think
FBI saying that
about
these had
it
to be fixed.
every
We had to
day.
put into place
I
new
want Steve
methods to
Bannon to
ensure that they
go
didn't occur.
away.
I've asked the Deputy Attorney General to task
I know
management
nothing's
of this, and she has done
conservative.
that.
Nothing's
The
conserved.
FBI has put up an internal
I
office of
believe
audit for
we
the purpose of
can
ensuring this.
indict.
We've changed the way
I
in which the
believe
FBI
we'll
software
indict.
for querying 702 occurs.
I
And we
believe
have really a fantastic independent set of auditors in our
we can indict.
National Security
We will
Division. The
indict.
consequence of just these changes have been an almost 90% reduction in queries of Americans.
Believe.
But I desperately want FISA to be continued, if not because I
I
care
can't
about it
think
for
right now.
myself,
It's too early
because
for
I care
lyric
about it for the
building.
American
It's
people.
7:21
We
a.m.
want to
here.
work
I
with
cannot build
you and
lyrics at
with the members of
7:21 a.m.
Congress
Give me an
to
hour.
work out a way in which
Always a
FISA
high note. There you
702
go,
can
Tom.
continue.
Attaboy.
So
Time of the
I think I'm in complete agreement. Patriotism and the need for trust and the need for FISA and the need to be sure
You
that
might be the
people,
only
the American
patriot.
people can trust that 702 is done properly.
time of the gentleman has expired. Mr. Ruppersberger.
Thank you. First thing, thank you for being here.
I don't know.
Um,
I was
This
talking over him.
discussion, I think, is very important. I too was an investigative prosecutor with wiretaps. The majority of what we dealt with.
Oh my
there,
God, did these guys wipe their own
murder,
ass?
was drugs.
Seriously, the fucking
And it's never
chairman
gonna
was
stop.
having a
Even when the cartels
young
were,
guy
they were
flip his
nasty,
papers.
they were killers, and they do bad things to people. But they're even more sophisticated and have probably more money than we do now.
What
Now,
the fuck is
but
this
what I want to talk
fossil?
about, and I want to talk about a little bit,
What
just
the fuck is
comment,
this?
to Mr.
Who
Garcia.
elected this piece of
I
shit?
know your background. I respect your background. You've raised some very good issues here. I would just hope that those of us on both sides of the aisle, when it comes to crime, that we really focus on what we need to do. Any good investigative prosecutor will tell you we need we need FISA.
Are you?
But we have to
What?
have these checks and balances,
Huh?
and that's what we do in
I
Congress.
mean, who is this guy?
You
I'm
move from
sorry.
one role to
Is he?
another role. So I would call out, and I've worked with many people here, and
Is he a nice
Mr.
person
Chairman,
or what is
we've
he?
worked a lot together on international issues and this issue. My one focus that I've done a lot in my experience on the Intelligence Committee and those type of things is cybersecurity. It's a very, very
Oh
serious
yeah,
issue.
he looks like he's way on
We
top
have
of
to deal with it.
cybersecurity
We have
threats,
to
just
be
like me.
very sophisticated. China, we in 2004, we didn't realize it, but China was stealing most of our information. Thank goodness we turned it around.
You didn't realize
The
it?
NSA and those things are
Interesting
working
admission.
well right now. My question,
Is that a
you
breaking news?
explained to us what going backwards, and this just drives me crazy. How can
Right,
we,
right.
with all the issues that are out there, the drug issues, the international issues, how can we talk about cutting this budget, the percentage what it is? I can't think that anybody,
Because the war on
especially working
drugs
on
doesn't work.
could let that happen where we
So
are.
he's
And it's gonna
making
get
good
worse, and China
budgetary
is ahead
decisions.
of
I
us
don't know.
right
That's
now in a
kind of
lot
what
of
you
areas.
hired him
So
for.
we better wake up and hopefully come together on
I think he's pretty
bipartisan
awake.
issues.
You, on the other hand, I do not. I do
And
not. I am not
stand up for
convinced.
FBI,
No,
stand up.
I'm more
Because
awake than you are, and I'm
unfortunately,
high.
DEA doesn't have any people. DEA has never been funded properly. So one of the things you had more funding, and when FBI did get into the narcotics, the one thing we had to talk them into, they couldn't wear wingtip shoes anymore when they were investigating.
On
But
a brighter
when
note,
they got in, it really increased.
I wonder how
And the
nervous
DEA
Mark Meadows
would
is.
go into the tough areas, a lot of the
Ruppersberger.
undercover.
Ruppersberger.
What do
Hello,
you
I'm Representative
what do you think we need
Ruppersberger.
to do,
Hello, I'm Representative
working
Ruppersberger,
FBI
and I'm
and
here to
DEA,
get your vote.
to make sure that we somehow get the
He looks
resources
creepy. I'm
to
sorry. I
move
don't know what his
forward?
politics
And I want
are.
to know
I
what
can't
impact,
tell, and that's
because this is an important
disturbing
message
on
to
his
get out to the
face.
American public. This kind of cut will do. And we can talk about issues which is important, education and
I
other things,
want
but
to
we're focused on
see
this right now. What
Roger
would be the impact
Stone
of these cuts
get
that we're talking about? The things that we're talking about,
arrested.
contract murder.
I don't
We're
think
talking
it's too
talks about
much to
cybersecurity,
ask.
these
He
things.
has been
You've had a lot of experience,
so
and
involved. I feel
very
like
stern
if
language
we
about that
put
here.
the pressure on Rob,
Well, let me take the easier question first, which is FBI
then
and DEA.
maybe
The last
he'll
time I
see
was at the Justice
shared
Department,
and
I spent most of my
other
time
people. Go
trying
ahead
to
and
iron
get
out
all
turf
kinds
wars
of
between FBI
trouble.
and
Oh, yep.
DEA and elbowing each other. When I came in this time, I was really very happy to see that
Oh,
the
I'm
two
not your
agencies work
voice this
together
morning.
extremely well. FBI does do some drug task forces. The DEA is obviously the principal agency doing that, but they've worked out memorandums of understanding so that their investigations are deconflicted, and most of these investigations are now done on joint task forces. So I'm extremely pleased with the way in which DEA and FBI
And I
work.
agree with you. I think it's strike force is the best way, federal, state,
Yeah,
and
but
local,
let's fire Chris Ray.
to move forward.
Other than that,
And on the question of the effects of the cuts, I'll say really what I said before, which is neither the
Brian, I
DEA
can't
nor the
imagine
FBI
anyone
can
walking
really
up to you
survive
and
with the kind of
thinking that they
they
would
can
go ahead and
survive,
have
but
that
they
conversation.
violent crime and drug
Do they not know
trafficking
who you are?
missions can't really survive if there were a
Jen,
22%
hey
cut
Jen, how
that
are
was supported on
you?
those.
Oh, I
Those
didn't
of us
catch
who
up with
agree
Radpod.
with your
I'm gonna do that. I'm way behind in
point
my
of
life.
view, we need to work with you and to get the message out.
I don't even
how
want to tell
serious
you how
this
behind I
is
am in my life.
to
It's kind of embarrassing.
our safety, to what could happen to the United States, especially as it's focused on China, but it's
Rupp,
everywhere.
put your mouth
Deal.
near the
Mr.
motherfucking
Clyde.
microphone, you stupid ass. God, thank God.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers, for holding this hearing and for Attorney General Garland for attending. In your opening statement, you said that you work to uphold civil rights. Is the Sixth Amendment one of those in the Bill of Rights?
I hate
Sixth
this
Amendment
guy.
It is, great.
certainly a civil
And,
right.
This guy's a
and you
fucking
work to uphold civil rights for all Americans, is
I
that
want to
correct?
be.
Yes,
This
that's
is the
correct.
I want to be
All right.
Jim
When the
Jordan.
Sixth Amendment of the Constitution says the accused shall enjoy the right to
They
a
are.
speedy
They're
and
getting to
public
speak. He's
trial by
talking
an
about
impartial
J6.
jury,
Fuck you.
what kind of a time frame does a speedy trial mean?
Well, there's two
Listen,
different
dude.
ones. So there's the Speedy Trial Act.
That's correct.
I used to be able to tell you exactly how long it took, but I believe at least the first part I remember is 30 days from the complaint.
That's
I
correct.
do.
I think it's 120 days after that, and then there are exceptions for different motions for speedy trial.
Okay, I believe it says 70 days from the filing of charges of the defendant's appearance
It's been a
before the
long time
judicial
since
officer.
I actually appeared in magistrate's court to make that argument.
Okay, great. I'm glad you are well aware of that.
Yeah, he
Mark
is
Houck was arrested
fucking
September
asshole.
23rd, 2022, and found
These
not
guys.
guilty on January 30th, 2023. The jury deliberated about an hour. DOJ accused Houck of twice assaulting the volunteer in front of a Planned Parenthood clinic and charged him with 2 counts
Oh,
of
sorry,
violating the
not
FACE Act,
J6. Planned Parenthood.
freedom of
You
access to
just have to
clinic
pick
entrances.
either one.
The arrest to the trial took just over 4 months. Would you consider
His
that a
voice is
speedy trial?
normal.
Yes.
All right, so would I. Last week, I visited the D.C. Department of
Clyde hasn't
Corrections
done
and met with
anything
some
of
of the 20
honor
prisoners
ever in
who
his
were
life.
arrested in connection to the
Fight
events
me.
at the Capitol on January the 6th. According to a Just Security article that came out on March the
Oh,
20th,
you know what? We
11
have
of the
a bunch
20
of
have not
recordings of
accepted a plea
prisoners
deal,
talking
nor
about
have they
how
even been
they would
brought
do it
to
again.
trial.
From
Today is
that
March
very
the
jail,
29th,
actually, Mr.
2023.
Clyde. So would you like us to
Attorney
play
General
those tapes
Garland,
for you?
is
Because
it
I have
correct that
hours
since
and
their arrest,
hours
some of
and
these
hours and
individuals
hours
have been
of
waiting
phone calls
approximately 2 years
to
for their
Nikki get
trial?
off the mother of Ashley
I don't know the
Babbitt, who stands
specifics
on
of
the
individual cases.
corner
The
outside
beauty of
the
the Sixth
jail in
Amendment
D.C.
is that
every
each
evening
of those people is
and lets
entitled
the
to a
prisoners
lawyer,
call
has a
out so
lawyer,
that they
who
can
can
talk
make a
over
speedy
live
trial
stream and
argument
raise
in the court.
money for their
Oftentimes, lawyers
commissary
ask for
so,
more
and their
time.
lawyers or
Oftentimes,
whatever it
they
is they
ask
want to
for
spend their money on.
exceptions
Actually,
for
we don't really
discovery.
know where the
There's an
money's
enormous
going,
amount of
frankly.
discovery
I've
in those
never heard of it
cases.
actually
But I
being
don't
put
know
on
anything
anyone's
about particular
commissary. But
cases.
anyway,
Does
I
waiting 2
digress.
years for a
The
trial
point
meet the
is
speedy trial clause of the
that
Sixth Amendment?
It
these guys
can
would do it again.
if
They've all
the
said it.
exceptions to the Speedy Trial
So,
Act
excuse me, and they've
are
all
met.
gotten
Those are the
the stuff that
responsibility of the
they've
lawyers
all
for
had their
those
due process.
defendants to bring to the
Well, I
court.
would
Period.
like you to
End
look
of
into that,
subject.
because to me,
This
I
is
don't
the
think
argument that
waiting
these guys make
2
every night
years
on that fucking
for your
corner outside
trial
the DC jail.
complies with the
It's
Sixth Amendment of the
irrelevant.
Constitution.
These
An
guys are
argument to
getting
be
better
made before
treatment than other
the judge
prisoners.
has the
They have
authority
access
to
to the
dismiss a
public
case for
every
violation of the
fucking
Speedy Trial
You're
Act.
absolutely
night.
correct. A judge does have that authority.
Every
You know,
fucking night. They
like you
speak
said in
over
your opening
live stream
statement,
to
you work
probably
to
up to
uphold the civil
1,000
rights of
people at
all
this point.
Americans. I
And it
think in
will
this
grow.
case, their civil rights are being violated. And I
So
would
guess
appreciate
what?
you looking into that.
They are going to die on that fucking hill that the J6 people
In your
are
opinion, should
prisoners of
unauthorized
war.
agencies or unauthorized programs in the federal
That's
government
what they're.
receive funding through the
That's what
Appropriations
they
Committee,
built.
through this
That's
committee?
the myth The mythology
Sorry,
that
I'm
they've
not
built.
following the question. If it hasn't been authorized, I.
Correct. In your opinion, should unauthorized agencies or unauthorized programs in the federal government receive funding through this appropriations committee?
At a high level of generality, seems like a syllogism. If it's unauthorized, it shouldn't have appropriations.
I agree. We have authorizing committees and we have appropriating committees here in Congress. Before a government agency or program can come into existence, it must be authorized. Then we as appropriators add the money to make the program function. So I agree with you that if a program is not authorized, it should not be appropriated. Is the Department of Justice currently authorized for appropriations?
Okay, now you got me here. I'm no expert at the difference between authorizations and appropriations in specific programs.
Well, we have authorizing committees, and the authorizing committee for the Department of Justice would be the Judiciary Committee.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Well, I will tell you, right here, Public Law 109-162, the last time the Department of Justice was authorized was 2009. 2009, when your budget was $26.2 billion.
So whose fault is that? How in the world is
So-
that on him?
You're asking for an appropriation of $40 billion, and the department does not have an authorization. I think that's a problem.
Okay. Sounds
Well,
like a fucking paperwork problem. You
Got me in a
fucking
certain way,
prick
but that
suit.
means that during the entire previous Trump administration and much of the Bush administration, the Justice Department was also
Well,
unauthorized.
that would be the Obama administration.
Well, if it's since 2009, it
Yeah.
would also include the
That
Well,
includes
through
the Trump
2009,
administration.
right here.
from 2009 to today, and all the previous administrations were also
That,
authorized.
that's correct, and it's
I don't-
incumbent
I-
upon
And
the
so
Department
what?
of Justice to ask
So
for an
Clyde?
authorization.
I have to, when I don't know the answer, I think the truthful thing for me to say is I don't know the answer, and I don't know the answer.
Okay, all right, well,
Sounds important, Clyde. Why
I'm
don't you
finding
look
it
into
difficult to approve
God, I hate him.
an appropriation to an agency that has not requested an authorization.
Oh, stop. This is
And
the dumbest.
how can I,
Look
in
at
good
the guy,
conscience,
next to him
appropriate
is like,
taxpayers'
oh,
money
God.
to an unauthorized
I told him
agency?
not to do this. I
So-
said, don't do it, Clyde. Don't.
Giving you the benefit of the doubt,
Bill.
and the last time that you were authorized,
Jeez,
which was
listen.
2009, I would think that
Swearing that
26.2 billion
ridiculous
is probably the,
loop.
Time of the
Most recent
gentleman has
offer.
expired.
thank you, and I yield back.
Mr. Trillin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Ranking Member Cartwright and Attorney General Garland. Thank you very much for appearing here today. As co-chair of the bipartisan Second Chance Task Force, I'd like to talk a little bit about the Bureau of Prisons and recovery outcomes. The data, it's clear that the best way to reduce recidivism is through stable employment. In fact, the probability of reconviction of someone that's earning at least $10 an hour for 2 months is 8% is the recidivism number for that individual, versus the probability of the unemployed ex-offender is 60%. So justice impacted individuals are prevented from realizing their potential for a number of reasons, including lack of job training. The Bureau of Prison faces severe staffing shortages. The BOP is staffed at 86%. They're funded at 93%, which leads to augmentation, whereas educators, medical professionals, the key people, are forced to work as correctional officers. If they were a business, it would definitely fail. This not only creates an unsafe prison conditions for the staff and for the inmates, but also affects their ability to program reentry and the ability of the inmates to access literacy classes, job training, substance use disorder, mental health treatment, etc. To make matters worse, extremists would like to drastically cut back to FY22 funding. These budget cuts will harm law enforcement. Could you talk about how decreasing funding to 22 levels will impact the safety of our correctional staff and also the inmates?
Yes, it would be devastating to the Bureau of Prisons, as it would be to all of the components at the Justice Department. It would make the staff less safe for themselves. It would make the prisons less safe for the prisoners. It would devastate our reentry programs and our anti-recidivism programs. BOP estimates that the consequence would be a complete hiring freeze and a furlough of more than 33,600 employees for 60 days. It would require the augmentation problem, which you're referring to, which means having non-correctional officers at work on correctional responsibilities. It would augment the non-custodial staff almost 100% of work hours. And the facilities would really only be able to address emergency requirements, so the First Step Act requirements would not be able to be met.
So meeting the First Step Act would be an impossibility.
Yes.
BOP is also the largest mental health and substance use provider in the country. 159,000 people incarcerated, 2/3 suffer serious mental health, 25% have substance use disorder. If the BOP funding levels are decreased to FY '22, how will that affect the Bureau's ability to provide mental health treatment and MAT to inmates?
Yeah, so I don't have a specific breakdown with respect to MAT, but it is of course correct that we've asked for $409.45 million in order to cover all the First Step Act programs, including the medicated assisted treatment. And a 22% cut would mean we would get none of this. This is just an extrapolation, but I assume this means that we would not be able to provide MAT.
Exactly. Would you agree that one of the leading causes of recidivism and making our country less safe is the lack of mental health and substance use disorder treatment in our prisons?
It's certainly one of the you've put your finger on an important problem, which is that recidivism is a problem with respect to violent crime in the country. The purpose of the First Step Act, which was a bipartisan action by the Congress, is to try to reduce recidivism. And there are a number of ways in which it can be reduced, including all the things you've mentioned, including in particular vocational training, but obviously also medically assisted training. If people come out of the prisons still addicted or with a need to get drugs, they're highly likely to recidivate.
Just quickly, solitary confinement. We introduced a bill last year to reform solitary confinement. President Biden has stepped up on this and issued an executive order to reduce restrictive housing. Yet, unfortunately, the percentage of BOP inmates has gone up. What steps is DOJ and BOP taking to implement the president's executive order?
So there are three different kinds of restrictive housing. There is special management units, there's the administrative maximum units, so-called supermax, and then there's the special housing units. So both of the first two, which are the most severe restrictions, are down since 2016. The special management unit is down 56% population since 2016. The administrative max, or ADX population, has decreased 17%. Unfortunately, the special housing unit populations have increased. It's not exactly clear, but it looks like a significant part of this is COVID. The difficulty of moving people in and out between different places and individuals waiting in the special housing units for transfer to designated facilities. The new director of the Bureau of Prisons, who I appointed, has taken this on as a personal responsibility on her part to get these numbers of people in the remaining restricted housing units down.
Thank you. I yield back, and she's doing a wonderful job.
The gentleman yields back. Mr. Elzey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, General. It's good to be here. We've not met before, but as soon as I shook your hand, I understand that you have some pretty thick skin because you get run through the ringer up here, and I appreciate your time and in coming up here. I'll get right to it. Are you familiar with the term, now, Congressman Garcia, Congressman Gonzalez, and I are all in naval aviation in our previous careers. Have you ever heard the terms alligator's closest canoe?
Yeah, I think I've heard it, the nearest bear to the door, but
That's it?
pretty
All
much
right.
the same, I think.
And have you heard the term stump the chump?
No, afraid not.
Okay. That means when you ask a question that you're not going to get the right answer on or something like this, it's something to put somebody on the spot. I promise you I'm not going to play that game with you today.
It.
But we are going to talk about the alligator closest canoe. I'm from Texas 6, which is just south of Dallas. I have a 9-county district, which has gotten pretty big, largely rural, not a whole lot of money in the district. And as I look at the budget requests for some of these programs, and I understand you have a very large department. You have a lot of folks working for you, and I know you didn't write this budget request yourself. And then you have to be under the microscope to answer for it. So I'm going to ask you a couple hard questions, namely about the SCAP program, which helps offset the cost of local law enforcement for holding within their jails illegal aliens who are criminals, either have been convicted of a felony or 2 misdemeanors. And previous to that, we had $234 million allocated to that program. That program's been cut. And I'm curious to know if there's an alligator close to canoe, which is, again, I said I'm not going to play stump the chump. We have a illegal immigration problem. We have a drug problem coming from the border. We have a human trafficking problem coming from the border.
Oh, he's
I think we can
Okay,
agree with
got
that.
it.
So I asked my local sheriffs
Stump the
how
chump.
much it
Did he
costs
really
them
say
to
that?
to
Are you
hold some of
kidding me
these
right now?
folks. So I've got 9 counties, but I talked to Sheriff Elmer Tanner of Navarre County, Brad Norman of Ellis County, my home county, Bill Wayburn of Tarrant County. We're still waiting on some of those numbers. There's 254 counties in Texas, and I would argue that Texas is bearing the brunt of what's going on the border. So I heard back from Elmer in Navarre County. He has held 28 of these
So far,
criminals
it's
for a
alligator
total
near
of
the canoe.
2,067 days.
Don't hunt the
At
donkey.
$69 a day, that's
Which
$142,000
no donkey should be
cost
hunted, let's
to
be fair. What
Navarre
did
County
donkeys ever
and the
do?
taxpayers of
Okay, so
Tarrant County.
don't hunt
There's only 52,000
donkeys.
people there. That's real
Alligator
money
at the
for
canoe.
counties like mine in my district,
What did he just
like mine.
say?
So
Stump the
my question is, if we're going to do away with $234 million program
He's really,
under the
he shined his head
justification
for this,
of
y'all. He just shined his
more
head this
emergent
morning. He
problems,
stood in front
like
of the
new grant
mirror
problems like
and
the Accelerating
practiced
Justice System
as he was
Reform,
gonna
which is
be in front
$300
of
million
the Merrick
discretionary
Garland.
over 10 years,
That is literally
incentivize
what is going through
jurisdictions in
this little
undertaking the
kid's mind
critical
right
work of addressing the entrenched issues of inequity and disparity. That's not the alligator closest canoe. Who on earth decided to cut that entire program that's going to offset my sheriffs from having to house illegal immigrant criminals
now. My
for that
sheriffs?
program? And that's just one of many, but I don't have that much time to
My
go over all of it.
sheriffs?
So I'd like to see
Hmm.
why you can justify cutting that money, justify the request for the other money.
I just
and
like
would you
to
be willing to
use
reinstate the
their
SCAP program?
grooming habits,
So I
and
think
their
you
intention
correctly
behind their
analyzed my
grooming
problem here,
habits
which is
as
my
fodder
scope was not
for
focused on SCAP.
kind of
I know the
humanizing
answer to your
them, right?
question,
And saying,
but I'd be
you
happy
guys
to
are
look
so
at it
full of
again
shit. You spend
for myself for the first
a
time. and have our
significant
staff
amount of
talk to
time in
others
front of the
about
mirror trying to
SCAP
achieve this
program
look.
and
So
whether there was an
stop.
alternative source of
Stop
funding or
trying
some
to
other
act like something you're
arrangement was
not.
made. I just honestly
You're
don't
just the
know.
same as the
And
rest
my
of us. You're a
experience
lol
for
cow, just
this and
like the
other
rest of
committees
us.
is expensive.
Alligator
I simply don't
canoes.
know. I
Yeah,
don't
babe,
know.
there's an
That
alligator
is
in
an
your
acceptable
canoe.
answer. We
Come on,
learned that at the
watch
Naval
out.
Academy too. That is a perfectly acceptable one. I'd love it for you to look into it because it's important to a district like mine that's not made of money, and we're doing the federal government's job. We do have a problem on the border,
Well, then I
and my
think we're already
sheriffs in
giving
my
your
district are
district
saying,
too much
where's the money coming
money.
from? And we just cut all of it. And they
I'm
were already only getting
Californian. I
31 cents on the
object.
dollar to house these illegal
What have you
immigrant
guys
criminals.
done to earn
And
that
that affects
attention?
my
I'm
district very,
just
very
kidding.
harshly. So my time's expired. I yield back. Thank you very much for the answer.
Gentleman yields back. Mr. Gonzalez.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Attorney General, for being here.
That guy is
You know,
texting
when
his wife
Uvalde
right now saying,
happened
you gotta clip
nearly
that,
10
honey, and
months
put it on the
ago in my
Facebook. Okay, you
district,
gotta clip that and
the
put it on the
first
Facebook
elected
for him.
official
All
to
right,
call
darling?
me was you.
She's like, all
And
right.
I'll be honest, I didn't have you on my bingo card as being the first call, and I want to thank you for that. And you said something then. You said anything I needed, you would help provide for as we were getting through Uvalde. And you know what? You kept to your word, and I appreciate that. I want to bring something up. I'm very concerned about, and look, I've done my part. I was one of 14 Republicans that helped pass this Safer's Community Act. This was a bill that is going to provide more money in mental health in our nation's history. On this appropriations committee, you know, I helped pass the appropriations to get through some of your funding. Now, one of the concerns I have is with the COPS and the Stop School Violence grants, okay? Some deep concerns with that. And what I've done is a lot of my communities, we're still healing from Uvalde. A lot of my communities are very concerned with their children's safety. Hell, I'm concerned with my children's school safety. And so one of the things that I represent 119 cities and towns in my district. And I've gone to every one of these little towns and I said, you need to put in for COPS grants and stop school violence grants. They don't have any grant writers, they don't have any resources, and they've been putting it in. And guess what? They've been denied time and time again. And I'll give you specifics. City of Divine, denied. City of Marfa, denied. Bexar County, denied. Medina County, denied. City of Castroville, denied. El Paso County, denied. These are things that I put letters of support behind, and they've been denied. I had, in Marfa, they have 4 police officers in that town. If this grant, if the COPS grant, if they would have gotten this COPS grant, they would have gone from 4 to 5 police officers. You know how excited they were? They were going, Tony, we get another police officer, we can do all these different things. They stayed up, I kid you not, they stayed up until 11 o'clock the day before it was due, because I'm pushing them. They submit it and then they get denied. I flagged this for you because in your budget request, you have a reduction, your department has a reduction, a
But he's
cut
mad that
in
his
COPS
influence
and
couldn't get a
schools and
grant
stop
approved.
school violence
Okay.
grants.
You,
It
you're mad
boggles
about a
my
grant
mind
approval?
on the discretionary
Sorry, that
spending
happens
for
a
that.
lot.
It boggles my
Welcome-
mind. We
welcome
just
to
saw
our
what happened in Nashville a couple days ago. Seems like every week there's something that's happening from a school, schools under siege here. I need your help. I'm absolutely doing my part. I need your help. Would love to hear your thoughts on what we can do
And
to
it is
get
what he should be
these
doing.
COPS
This is
grants and
actually
get these stop
advocating for
school
his
violence grants
district.
over the finish line.
Okay, so this is you've identified something that I don't know about these specific sheriffs, and I would like my staff
Curious
to
what the
meet
grant
with others
requests
to
were
go
for.
over these particular
I'm very
grant
curious about that.
applications, so we can figure out what the problem was there. We've put a lot of money into, and we have it in part of our request now, helping rural sheriffs make the applications, particularly small sheriff's offices, small law enforcement offices, as you've described, sometimes have difficulty. It's not just filling out the paperwork, it's doing the computer work and everything. We've recognized that, and we had a program to make that easier under our OJP grants. Obviously hasn't succeeded here. I do want to say that we are asking with respect to funding.
There's a lot that can go wrong with the grant seeking process, so I'm not, I would want a lot more information before coming down on one side or the other. I know all about grants, but the thing is,
For the COPS
we're looking
hiring
for this
program, we're
coordinated
asking
initiative.
for an increase.
I don't know,
of
I'm still wondering about the
$2.4
whole
billion
thing, Gal.
this year,
There
not
has
a
to be some
decrease,
more
an
to the story.
increase. A $213 million increase in the yearly funds and a $2.2 billion in a multi-year funding. The STOPS
Unless his
grants
Office
come
of
under the Office of
Grant
Violence Against
Management
Women
is
Act,
fucked up,
and they're
which I
also
don't know
increased.
what
It
Trump
may
did
be
or did
that
not do to the
there
DOJ
are
Office
two
of
parts
Grant
of these.
Management.
There's a new gun crime prevention strategic fund, which is an increase of $884 million or $4.4 billion over 5 years. It will provide some of the funding that used to be in some of the other programs, and that includes hiring, recruitment, retention, training of officers. I think, so we're in no way reducing the amount,
We
we're
need a
increasing it.
comedy grant.
Your offices may still be
Now, I
having
will
the kind
say,
of problems that
for
we've
something like
discussed, and I've
that,
been
when it
asked by
comes
the
to
team talk
crucial or
about it.
critical
I'd
needs
appreciate that
for a department,
because this
I
is
am,
an important topic that's not
unclear as
going
to why
away
they would
anytime
go to a
soon.
standard
And what I'm
grant
starting to
seeking
see is
process and why they
people are
wouldn't have a
giving
more
up in the
expedited
federal
process
government.
or a
They're
different
going,
process
why even
for
submit it, Tony? It's a
requesting
waste
that.
of my
That seems like
time.
poor
The
funding
need
to
is
me. That doesn't
absolutely
seem
there,
like
especially in these small
something
communities.
extra.
We'll work our guts out in our office to
I know.
help
I know.
find these, identify these
I know.
people, vet them to make sure that you're getting good products. I wouldn't put a letter of support behind any of these projects if I didn't do the due diligence on my end, but I need your help. You have a partner up here to get things over the finish line, but I need your help. Thank you, Chairman. I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. Time has expired.
But to your
That
point, Gal, it's a great
concludes
use of
the
that
first
representative's time
round
when
of
he's sitting in
questions,
front
and
of
I
Merrick
believe
Garland
we
advocating
probably
for the
have a
actual
few
people he
members
represents. I mean,
who
hello,
would
that's
want to be part of the
representational
second
government right
round.
there in action. Well
But,
done.
so we will do that, but we will take a 5-minute recess.
Okay, we'll find
If I
something
could,
else to
Mr. Chairman, if I could
watch.
have an indulgence for just one moment with respect to my answer to Mr. Klein.
Yes.
I've taken a look at that FBI response to subpoena. There actually was one full field investigation. I don't know any of the details about it, but there was, and if you take a look at the letter, I think I said there were none, but it turns out there was one.
Committee stands in recess for 5 minutes.
Hold on just a minute. La 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 la. I should listen to this back. Is it because I talked over the whole thing, gal? That might be why. They might actually play it back. A do 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 do. 22 labeled, 6 investigations, 1 total that required total field investigation. That was the entire thing. Yeah. 22 people as part of the whole school board targeting thing. It ended up being 22 people looked at, 6 seriously, 1, I guess, more seriously, but it just wasn't, they cannot make fetch happen with that. They just can't. It's not possible. I'm looking for something. It's only 5 minutes. Well, you know what? Oh, I don't want to get any kind of strikes. But I'm going to go ahead and just share that. Hold on. And we'll see. Hopefully I don't get a strike. I'm going to say, I like you. Hi, I like you. Let's turn your sound. Yeah, what about Scott Pressler? What about Scott Pressler? What about Scott Pressler? What about Garrett Siegler? What about what's Operation Paperclip? I keep forgetting. Morphed into the Republican. Oh, is that something old? Hey, Lion and Gal and everyone. I really need to have like a group panel conversation about and to try and really tell a simple story of how we got here because all of you hold like different parts of the story. Do you guys think you would be interested sometime in doing just a panel conversation off the cuff about the how we got here thing? Would you guys do that? Consider doing that? I think it'd be fun. Maybe we could get Clearing the Fog. And, you know, Tina and Jay Rance and Clayburg. Wouldn't that be fun? I would love to hear that. I would love to hear them all talk about. I would prepare. Gal, I would prepare. I would prepare. Oh, Nazis in the U.S. Thank you, Marie. It wasn't coming to me. I know what you're talking about. I would prepare questions for that. I think we should do it. I think we should do it in April. Yes, Ted. We should do it in April. Lion, and I never know if Lion, if you're going by your real name here, I just don't, I don't call you by your real name here unless you want me to. But I'm happy to call you by your real name. Operation Paperclip was a secret United States intelligence. Oh, it'd be so fun, Ivan. These people are so funny. I love these people so much, and they're so smart. Operation Paperclip was a secret United States intelligence program in which more than 1,600 German scientists, engineers, and technicians were taken from the former Nazi Germany to the U.S. Oh, interesting. Yay! Hey, everybody, look, it's David Benjamin of Twitter fame. Well, and other fames. Sorry, I have some coffee in my throat. I'm going to cough for a minute. Like, wouldn't that be fun? I would definitely prepare. I would prepare questions. Well, you never know, David, man, fucking internet's crazy. Bitches be crazy on the web. So I don't want to get involved anyone in the middle of that. And certainly not, man, I got some real mean ass people after me, David. I have no idea why. But there you are. No, they're not really that. Doesn't it? Hey, baby, how are you? It's nice to see you. I think it would be interesting. And, well, Greg and LB. Let's get everybody. Oh, yeah, Greg does have, he has a post about that. The right-wing obsession with them, they think we I mean, I don't know. I was in Moscow and Leningrad in the 80s, in 1984, and yeah, that's okay. I'm gonna be honest. Like, I don't think they understand what modern day communism manifested like, or manifests like. But when it manifested in 1984 in Moscow and in Leningrad, let me tell you, that's some pretty intense shit. I'm not gonna lie. They do follow you. Even as a stupid college student, you got followed, that was dumb. I'm a spy, yeah. I'm a bad spy. They didn't want me. Damn it. Rejection everywhere I turn. I can't even pick me, pick me. Well, I am Cambridge Analytica, gal, you know. Me and Chris Wiley, never in the same room at the same time. My trivia getting your mother's maiden name passwords. It's funny that none of the trivia questions ever actually dealt with your mother's maiden name or things that would be Unturis. Marie. Oh my God, that just brought back so many memories. Oh my God, literally, we're gonna go back, but literally, when you went anywhere out of your hotel, you had to check in with Intourist. Marie, oh, we could have fun conversations. Here we go. Let's go back to the Q-tip boy. Hey, there's my Q-tip.
I'll recognize
Get in my
myself
ear.
for an opening of second round.
God, they're just so fucking low
Attorney
speaking.
General, in the
Low
budget
talkers.
request, you say, and I quote, "The United States has experienced a dramatic increase in violent
That's a
crime
really nice
incidents,
campfire.
with the number of violent crimes increasing by 29% in 2021." That's an alarming statement, and I'm sure we agree on that. Um, we should be prioritizing targeting violent crime across the country, and yet your budget submission is full of funding for programs that aim to keep criminals on the street as opposed to behind bars. We're seeing unprecedented warfare, if you will, in our major cities across the country, in every region of the country. Violent crime. And we should be tackling the problem face on. But the department, for example, requests $50 million for a new program that would incentivize jurisdictions to empty juvenile detention facilities, close the prisons. Sounds
I
like a follow-up
literally
to the
graduated
defund the
with a
police
degree in
group.
Russian language and literature because a
Here,
professor
December
told me I was good at language when I was
2022
a
memorandum
sophomore. That's how I
revising the
chose my
department's charging
damn
and sentencing
fucking.
policies, make it harder for
I
prosecutors
mean,
to
really,
charge
you
criminals,
guys,
and
literally.
encourages lighter sentences.
I pick
Why
things
are we
because boys tell me
handcuffing
I'm good at them.
federal prosecutors from holding criminals accountable? at such a dangerous time.
I'm
across
literally
the
that.
country. Sir?
I guess it makes a better spy story.
I completely agree that we need to prioritize violent crime, and we are doing that. The memorandum that you're talking about says in several places, but particularly right at the beginning, the purpose is for us to be able to allocate our resources and focus them on combating violent crimes. So the sentence, a discretion that's being given to the prosecutors is aimed at using their resources against violent crime, and in no way calls for reductions in sentences with respect to violent crime. In every place in that memorandum, it explains that violent crime sentences are to be used to the extent needed to prevent dangers to the community. With respect to defunding the police, we are asking for more than $4.5 billion, $15.3 billion over 5 years for investments in state and local police. That includes a $2.4
Well,
billion
that won't even buy
increase in,
Panera at lunchtime.
cops
Okay,
hiring
Merrick,
just
come on
for
now.
FY '24 alone. An increase of $20 million for our Project Safe Neighborhoods, an increase in $59 million for public safety officer benefit programs for the survivors of deceased officers, additional $884 million for new gun crime prevention strategies to be given to state and locals for recruitment, retention, and training. So with respect, there may be some people in the country calling for defunding the police, but it is not the Justice Department, and it is not President Biden, who made quite clear that he wants to increase the funding.
Well, I'm not focusing on defund the police, but I am focusing on all across the country, there's public revolt against prosecutors who are considering milder treatment of criminals. So the clear sentiment of the country is to tackle violent crime by making it tough on criminals. Do you agree with that or not?
No, I do agree with that, and our focus is on making it tough on violent criminals. That's where we are putting our resources. Those are the sentences we're asking our prosecutors to seek. Those are the cases we're asking our prosecutors to bring.
Let me ask you about the immigration crisis. The department caseload, pending immigration caseload, stands at over 2.1 million and growing. According to TRAC, a nonpartisan nonprofit data research center that reports on U.S. immigration court statistics, since the start of the Biden administration, the growth in the backlog has been accelerating for the last 6 months, and yet the administration determined to repeal Title 42. The U.S. is on the verge of a deluge of new migrants if that occurs. The pending immigration case backlog is outrageous. According to TRAC, the nonpartisan group, since the start
My
of
favorite
the
is the
Biden
page turner.
administration,
Okay, this
the
kid,
growth of the
this
backlog
guy
has
here,
been
let me use my
accelerating
pointer.
at a breakneck speed.
This dude was literally trying to pick pages apart for
423,000
him.
new cases
What the fuck's going on with
just
him?
the last
What's going
6
on?
months. And yet, with this administration determined
And here we go with the steel
to
blue
repeal
bullshit
Title
again.
42,
Here we go, dark suit, nice.
the U.S. is on the verge of a
Dark
deluge
suits,
of new
dark suits.
migrants. What do you say to that?
Well, you're right about the increase in
Good
backlog.
morning, Lee.
That's
How
why
are
we're asking
you?
for
How are things in Michigan?
965 new
Hope it's
staff
okay
for
there.
the immigration courts,
Well,
150
we're
new
here
IJ
listening to me
teams.
talk over
And
everybody.
that's why we're asking for an additional $367.1 million for a backlog reduction initiative to enable us to use new technologies, virtual courtrooms, dedicated dockets, et cetera. The Title 42 problem, Title 42 was an emergency authorization for the pandemic. The only question about whether Title 42 can be continued is if the pandemic
I'd
is
say since the
continuing.
page turning's happening, the grooming
It
is
does not
complete.
appear to be continuing.
He is the
We already
tech.
had one court that ordered the end to the Title 42 process because of the end of the pandemic. It's the same thing that's led to the, reasons why mask mandates and all those other things have had to come down. So Title 42 is just a question of whether it's legally possible to continue using an emergency health provision that depended on the pandemic. Now, what the administration has to do instead are policies to be adopted by the Department of Homeland Security, which they've issued notice of proposed rulemaking to take place when Title 42 comes down. And those are the policies that DHS believes will substitute. But Title 42 it's just a question of, once the pandemic is down, the grounds for using Title 42 fall away, legal grounds.
Your budget includes $150 million to provide taxpayer-funded lawyers to individuals and families in immigration proceedings. $150 million could be better spent, in my judgment, shoring up the border in preparation for the termination of Title 42. We know that tax border policies incentivize illegal entry and help fuel the illicit activities of criminal organizations and the cartels in Mexico and the Northern Triangle countries as they profit off human trafficking. The impact the administration's border policies have had on smuggling, human trafficking, and other transnational organized crime. What are we doing to prepare for a potential wave of undocumented immigrants surging the border once Title 42 is ended, if it is?
So on the first question you asked about human smuggling, again, one of the first things I did when I came into the department was establish what we call Task Force Alpha, which is aimed at human smuggling, particularly from the Northern Triangle countries, exactly as you describe, and from Mexico. It is a task force of the Justice Department and the Department of Homeland Security and the U.S. Attorney's offices all across the southwest border. They have been identifying smuggling groups in the Northern Triangle countries in Mexico and have been prosecuting large numbers of those people. And yes, they're going to have to ramp up, and they are ramping up. We have money in the budget for additional money for that task force. My understanding of what Homeland Security has in mind to replace Title 42 is an authorized pathways program. As I understand it, people will have to present at the ports using this app called, I think it's called CBP-1 to schedule appointments, or they have to make arrangements in their own countries. And if they cross otherwise, the presumption will be against them being eligible for asylum. I'm not sure I've gotten their entire program, but I believe that's the main elements of it.
Mr. Cartwright?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, Attorney General, one of my favorite authors said this about corrections. He said, the degree of civilization of a society can be measured on entering its prisons. And I know you agree with that. And part of why I know it is because a quarter of the money we send to your department goes to the administration of the Federal Bureau of Prisons. We just crossed over a grim anniversary, and it was the 10-year anniversary of the murder of Eric Williams at United States Prison in Canaan in Wayne County in my district. Eric Williams was alone patrolling in the prison, and he was attacked by a violent criminal, a gang member, who stabbed him so many times, I won't repeat that here. And there's no question that if Eric Williams had had a partner, he would not have been killed. You and I have discussed the level of staffing and the practice of augmentation, but I'm thrilled that in the fiscal year 2023, we included $180.5 million above the request of the president to sustain and increase hiring efforts. That's the only answer, is put more money toward the salaries and expenses of the Bureau of Prisons if we're gonna make prisons safer, not only for the correctional officers, but also for the inmates. My hope and expectation is that this extra funding will help the Bureau reduce its reliance on augmentation, that is the diversion of non-correctional officer staff for CO duties. Since the beginning of my time in Congress, I've been raising my voice about this. Can you provide us an update on how these funds are being implemented by the Bureau of Prisons?
Yes, so you're right, Congressman. Being a correctional officer is an extraordinarily dangerous job, and the pay isn't what it should be in order to encourage people to come. And some of the locations are difficult locations to live in with a family. So recruitment and retention and promotion are difficult for the Bureau of Prisons. That's why we've asked for, in this budget, $109 million particularly for hiring and retention incentives. We've been able to work out an arrangement with OPM to provide higher amounts of money for incentive hiring than would normally be available. And I'm advised by BOP that 1/3 of their facilities already have these hiring incentives in place as of February, but we'll need additional money in this budget to continue that program. We're at about 86% of authorized positions now filled. But you're right, we have to rely on augmentation, and that's not good. Even though the non-correctional officers are given correctional officer training, it's still not the right solution. We've asked for an increase in $251.7 million for BOP for new staff. That will give us 2,250 new staff through the end of FY '24. If we're able to achieve that hiring, we'll be in a much better place with respect to the safety of both the officers and the inmates.
Thank you, sir. The first hearing we had in CJS this year was we had the Inspector General, Michael Horowitz, come on in, and he testified that his office is concerned about the impact staffing shortages have had on non-correctional officer positions, particularly doctors and nurses. What can you tell us about BOP's efforts to hire in these critical positions?
I'm sorry, this is another question I'm going to have to answer with I'm not sure, or maybe I don't know, and I'll have to get our staff to get back together with yours. I haven't focused particularly on the medical staff, but my guess is we have enormous difficulty hiring them, just as we have difficulty hiring the other staff.
Well, we'll follow up with you. I want to say I agree with Mr. Elzey. We appreciate I don't know answers if that's the truth.
I'm hoping not to have too many.
Too many people guessing or taking stabs at things they don't know about. Yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Clyde?
Thank you, Attorney General. On September the 30th, 2023, there was a FOIA request made regarding the ongoing attacks against pro-life organizations. And under federal law, as I understand, federal agencies have 20 working days to respond to FOIA requests. Is that not correct?
Yes, that's the law.
Okay, great. To date, the Department of Justice has not complied with the request, and I have the request in front of me. It was sent to you and to the FBI. It says FOIA communications pertaining to the ongoing attacks against pro-life organizations. And, Mr. Chairman, I request unanimous consent to enter this into the record.
Without objection.
Thank you. It's been nearly 6 months. Why has the Department of Justice not complied with federal law on this request? I mean, this is a request sent by multiple entities, by Advancing American Freedom, Concerned Women for America, Heritage Action, Family Research Council, all joined together on this FOIA request, and it has gone unanswered. Why?
So, again, I obviously don't know that particular request. We get thousands and thousands of FOIA requests, and some take longer to answer than others. This one sounds in part to be asking about ongoing investigations, and of course, that requires redaction of information to protect the investigation so that the investigations succeed. But I don't know the specifics, and I'll be happy to have my staff get in touch with yours.
I would appreciate an answer to this FOIA request. Okay. On that note, there's another FOIA request that was sent by a concerned citizen in Washington, D.C. And that concerned citizen requested access to records concerning data related to the prosecution of homicide, rape, robbery, aggravated assault, burglary, larceny, motor vehicle theft, and arson that occurred in Washington, D.C. in the last 5 years. The response to that request was denied. And it says, the United States Attorney informed you that it does not maintain records such as those that you described. The United States Attorney in Washington, D.C. does not maintain records on the prosecution of violent crime in Washington, D.C. That stuns me.
Again, I don't know the specifics here. Be happy to have staff get back to you. Obviously, some of the statistics only the Metropolitan Police Department has.
I don't mean arrest, I mean prosecution.
I don't know the answer to that question, and I'll be happy to
Okay,
get
can I get your commitment that we can have those records of prosecution of violent crime in D.C.?
Yeah, you have my commitment that my staff will get in touch with yours and with the U.S. Attorney's Office to find out what the holdup here is.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. One last question for you regarding firearm tracing. In your belief, is every firearm trace that is conducted by ATF linked to an actual crime?
Well, when you say every, it's always a potential problem. The normal way in which tracing happens is that a police department submits a request based on a gun found at a crime scene. I don't know whether there's something outside of that, but that's typically what happens. State and local police or federal law enforcement gets a gun at a crime scene and then tries to trace back where it was purchased from.
Okay. Last year, Representative Cloud from Texas sent a letter regarding firearm traces, and part of the response to that letter said, the NTC only traces crime guns, and every trace must be identified as such by the requester selecting the appropriate crime code. And we requested in a follow-up letter, please provide a list of all the crime codes an agency must choose from when a trace is requested. So far, we've gotten no response to that letter. It's been a year. Will you commit that you will respond to that letter
Again,
with the crime codes?
I will certainly commit that my staff will get the letter from you, and will then contact ATF and find out what the holdup is.
Okay, great, because I can personally attest as a federal firearms licensee myself, being the recipient of trace requests, there are multiple traces that have nothing to do with crime whatsoever. Whether it's a gun that was lost, whether it was a gun that was sent back to the manufacturer for repair and we get a trace on it, whether it's a gun that's voluntarily turned into a law enforcement agency for a temporary hold that we get a trace on, or whether a gun was owned by an employee that currently has it and we got a trace on that gun, which I don't understand. So I really don't understand how the tracing process works, and I really want to understand
I
that.
think you're entitled to an explanation, and I'm going to ask the people from ATF to get together with your staff and provide
Great.
you with an explanation.
Thank you very much, and I yield back.
Mr. Morelli?
Thanks so much, Mr. Chair. Attorney General, as I asked my first round of questions, I think I unfortunately had to cut you off about, but I would like to go back to the National Public Safety Partnership, new initiative. My city in Rochester, New York, was selected as one of the 6 sites announced back in October. Can you just talk about the importance of the National Public Safety Partnership and the impact it has on local communities?
Yes, I'd be happy to. It's DOJ, state, tribal, local collaboration. I don't know if you have tribes involved in yours, but if not, then they wouldn't be involved, to address local crime through training and technical assistance and resources. So the effort here is to help our state and local law enforcement partners get the kind of training and technical assistance and resources that they need to protect the public safety. There are, in October, there were 6 new sites, one of which was Rochester. I'm not sure what the total number of sites around the country is. I think it may be around 40, but I'm not sure.
And I will say parenthetically, the reaction from local law enforcement has been very positive, so obviously want to thank you for that work. Just to change the subject a little bit, I wanted to go back to the conversation earlier regarding guns and firearms. I understand since you became Attorney General that DOJ has conducted numerous large-scale investigations of illegal firearms trafficking operations, which have led to arrests and prosecution in some of the individuals most responsible for flooding our communities with guns. In your testimony, you identified the new gun trafficking provisions of the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, providing additional tools for prosecutors to disrupt the flow of illegal firearms. And I wonder if you could just share with us what kind of manpower and resource are necessary for the department to undertake these operations, and whether or not you feel the department has adequate resources to meet those needs. Yeah, maybe let's just start with that.
Yeah, so prior to BISCA, the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, we were having to do straw purchaser cases pretty much one by one. We didn't have a sort of enterprise approach to this. BISCA has allowed us to use a almost RICO-like approach to gun trafficking, and has made the straw purchaser statute more clear for our purposes here. What we're talking about here are people who are purchasing guns knowing that they're going to be used by drug gangs or by violent crime gangs, and moving them to different parts of the country. We've established, ATF has established cross-jurisdictional task forces, one on the East Coast, one on the West Coast, one in the center of the country, and 2 more, and I can't remember exactly where they are. So we've asked for, in this particular request, for an additional $25.6 million for 72 ATF agents to address gun violence in the cities most affected, and to take advantage of what BISCA has provided with respect to gun trafficking. We've had 2 major prosecutions since BISCA was passed, which was just at the end of last year. I don't remember exactly what the numbers are, but there have been large numbers of guns and large numbers of defendants. And the consequence, we've been able to prevent that from getting to criminal gangs.
I wonder if you could just comment on, or whether you know this, specifically local law enforcement agencies, and how often they seek ATF assistance in the fight against gun violence in their communities. Are you satisfied with the number of times you engage, or do you think there could be greater engagement between local law enforcement and ATF?
Well, I mean, Nashville's a good example, the terribly horrific shooting that just happened. ATF's entire office went on the scene to assist Nashville PD. Fortunately, well, and unfortunately, but Nashville PD was right on it within 14 minutes and killed the shooter. So they did not need assistance with respect to the immediate response, but they're getting assistance now with respect to identification of motive, follow-up, and all that kind of thing. I have been to quite a number of U.S. attorneys' offices around the country, and in each case, I meet with the federal law enforcement heads and with the state and local heads. And really the purpose of that for me is to assure myself that the state and local law enforcement agencies are working well with our federal law enforcement. ATF is always part of the mix on these task forces. It has particular expertise in the tracing of crime guns and in the tracing of ballistics. and the ability to compare, a bullet fired in New York and a bullet fired in Washington, match them up, realize it's the same shooter. This has been very successful in the case of a serial shooter in Washington, where ATF was able to match to a shooter in Washington, where there happened to be a video camera, which then made it possible to find the shooter in New York. And it operates, in addition, these trafficking and violent crime task forces. So in my view, it's been quite successful, and state and local agencies seem, everywhere I've been, eager for the kind of support ATF can provide.
Terrific. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Klein?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You are talking a lot about the need for more resources to combat increases in illegal gun crimes, correct?
Among many other things, yes.
And let's go down the list. Drug trafficking, you talked about that
Yes,
one.
yes.
Human trafficking, sex trafficking
Yes.
crimes are on the rise. Would you say that those who are prosecuted for those crimes are 100% legal residents of this country?
I'm not in a position to answer that. I'd be surprised if all of them are legal residents, but I don't have statistics on how many are not. But
Would you say that the volume of crossings at our southern border contributes to that rise in crime, just from a sheer numbers perspective?
I don't have the statistics. Obviously, some people who cross the border commit crimes, and some people who, and the vast majority do not.
Right.
Many people in this country commit crimes, and the vast majority do not. I don't have the statistics you're asking for.
But you also would agree that in addition to the migrants who are detained and then released into the country and then commit crimes, increase those numbers of crimes in this country, the number of gotaways who evade apprehension and then commit crimes also increases the number of crimes committed in this country, correct?
I'm stuck in the syllogism here. I think that the answer is the more people who commit crimes, the more crimes we have in the country.
Right. So would you agree then that, and support efforts to try and contain that crossing at our southern border to essentially secure our southern border so that fewer are crossing who are either gotaways or not in this country legally, would help contribute to a decrease in the number of crimes committed?
Yeah, as I was explaining, I think the Department of Homeland Security, which has the responsibility for the border, obviously, has a notice of proposed rulemaking with respect to funneling the people to the ports of entry and making the vetting required at those locations or back at an embassy or otherwise, or having to seek asylum first in a country through which they travel, all of which are aimed at the purpose that you're talking about.
Have you taken positions on those proposals to say require that you request asylum from the country from which you're coming, Mexico, if you're coming from a Central American country?
Yeah, so our job, of course, is to look at the legality of the program. The policy is determined by DHS, and we have approved these programs as being legal.
Okay. But you haven't taken any position on efforts to secure the border, which would actually help your department?
We're obviously, let me put it this way, eager to do everything possible to secure the border. I don't think anybody would not feel that way.
All right. I want to go briefly to a conversation we had with IG Horowitz at the most recent open annual worldwide threats hearing in the Senate. FBI Director Wray admitted that the FBI has in the past, according to the Wall Street Journal, bought precise geolocation data before backing away from the practice in the face of thorny legal issues. IG Horowitz last week agreed with my concerns about this disturbing practice. In fact, he said the DOJ, quote, took advantage of legal ambiguities before the Supreme Court's decision in Carpenter v. U.S. And he went on to say that post-Carpenter, of course, that shouldn't have happened. Do you agree with what DOJ Inspector General told the subcommittee last week, that government agencies' purchases of information about Americans' location should not have happened after Carpenter?
Yep. So Carpenter occurred during the last administration. My understanding from reading Director Ray's testimony is that, I don't remember what year this occurred in, but that they did take some geolocation data but no longer do so and haven't done so for a couple of years.
Okay, so
I don't know any more than what he testified to.
no parts of DOJ or other agencies are buying similarly sensitive information like about Americans' communications or activity, financial or otherwise?
Well, we're jumped from purchases of aggregate of commercial information.
Well, let's stay there. Are any
those are
parts
two
of DOJ still purchasing
Yeah,
location
so
information?
that question, the department has an investigation going on internally to find out which parts.
But you don't know?
No, because it's ongoing. I don't mean investigation in a pejorative sense, but we're looking into that question. My understanding on geolocation is that we don't purchase that.
Time of the gentleman has expired.
Thank you.
Ms. Ming?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Attorney General Garland, for your service to this country and for your leadership, especially in the last few years in helping our country from protecting our country from violent crime and especially hate crimes over the last several years. I know that public safety is on top of the mind for all of us on both sides of the aisle. We talked a little bit about threats of drug trafficking, human trafficking, and other types of serious crimes, and wanted to know if the Republicans' proposed cuts of 22% to 2022 levels were enacted, how would that affect public safety in this country?
I don't know who's proposing the cut, but we were asked to, by a member of the larger appropriations committee, to evaluate the consequences of a 22% cut. And the consequences would be devastating to public safety. They would make it enormous cuts in parts of the Justice Department, from our law enforcement agencies to our grant-making agencies, all of which are used for the purpose of improving public safety, and it would devastate all those programs.
If a 22% cut was enacted, would it impact our ability to maintain and hire cops?
Yes, so we don't do the actual hiring of.
Or grants for hiring?
Yeah, if you mean by cops, state and local, yeah. Yes, it would dramatically. The COPS program itself estimates 300 to 400 fewer federally law enforcement funded COPS positions would be available, be a reduction of $50 million in the COPS hiring program.
So cuts to these grants could lead to smaller police forces across the country.
Yes, and of course, it isn't only the OJP, the COPS grants that provide money for state and local police, the Burn JAG and are administered by the Office of Justice Programs, and others within that also provide funding for local governments, and those would be cut as well. So yes, there would be a reduction in the ability of state and local police to hire.
And specifically on hate crimes, if cuts were enacted, how restrained would your department be in supporting our community-based organizations and combating hate crimes?
I don't think we have I don't think I have a specific breakdown with respect to that, but I think that there would have to be a cuts in all of the money that we have provided for hate crime. This includes the money that Congress provided in the No Hate Act, as well as the money that's used by the Civil Rights Division and the FBI to investigate hate crimes. We, in our current budget request, we've asked for $43 million in OJP funds, which include the Jabara Hire No Hate Act grants. And if you take 22% off of that, you see what the consequence would be. And likewise, $13.2 million for the Civil Rights Division. These are additions, but the total is $28.3 million, so we'd have to slash that. And the same with the FBI's Civil Rights Investigation Division. So in every respect, our ability to respond to hate crimes, regardless of who the hate is aimed at, any crime in that regard, we would have more difficulty investigating and prosecuting.
And lastly, if there were proposed 22% cuts, how would this impact our fight against both terrorism and drug enforcement efforts in this country?
Yeah, so most of the fight on terrorism is FBI and the National Security Division of the Justice Department. The FBI overall predicts a loss of 11,000 positions at the FBI and a loss of $1 billion of non-personnel costs. It's going to have a dramatic effect on our national security apparatus. And with respect to drugs, the DEA predicts a $620 million reduction in base resources. So all the money that we're asking for in increases would go away, and there would be that amount of a cut. It would just make it would make our efforts to fight the cartels, to fight, to prevent fentanyl from coming into the community, to get it out of the community, it would devastate that.
Thank you. I yield back.
Mr. Elsey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, General. Good to see you again.
Thank you.
I'd like to address this 22% number that I continue to hear. I'm on several committees, 3 subcommittees in appropriations and small business, and I keep hearing this 22% number, and I'd just like to address the fact that clearly is a talking point from the other side of the aisle. That's fine, but the reality is that that we can't continue the spending spree that we're on. And when it comes to cops, I look at the request, and I'm taking a look at the real numbers. The Department of Justice itself has asked for 11.9 million cut, or 2%, in the cops program. So it's a little false to go after the 22% and say, well, what happens if we cut 22% across the board? These are going to be targeted, and I'll reference my previous point about the alligator closest to the canoe. We have real crime going on in our country right now of fentanyl that is killing Americans 200 per day. The drug overdose epidemic is killing 300 men and women age 18 to 45 in this country every day. In World War II, we lost 418,600 Americans in 3.5 years of war. That's 305 Americans every day fighting tyranny overseas. We're losing 287 every day in this country. So if that's not a war, I don't know what is, and that is the alligator closest to the canoe. 105,000 Americans dying every year. That's more than's been lost in Ukraine the last year. I don't know how else to spell it. For me, that's the alligator closest to the canoe. And as a Texas citizen and a representative from 9 rural counties in Texas, it's a big deal. That is the alligator closest to the canoe. So the 22% should be funded to going after securing and protecting American citizens every day. That's the #1 job of any government, state, local, and federal. And so I appreciate the efforts that the department does undertake, and we need to continue to make requests that take care of that first. And when we do have to make cuts, then we target those things that we need to fund first to secure and protect Americans first. And as I said, on the new grant programs, we can look at some of those that are more of a concept than a real crime-fighting issue going forward. I don't need to go over those, but the reality is that's where you're going to probably go after some of the cuts. Let's talk about workforce and telework for now. I asked this question of every department head, and so can you give me the number? You may or may not be able to. If you're requesting a budget higher than the 22 budget, what % of the DOJ's workforce is teleworking?
So if I could just correct one thing, or at least we both seem to have very different numbers with respect to the COPS hiring program. My number is we're asking for an increase of $2.4 billion, an increase of $213 million in discretionary funds in our budget, and an increase of $2.2 billion in mandatory new funds. And we're not asking for a decrease in the cops' hiring budget. I don't know what the discrepancy is, but I'd be eager for our staff to get together with yours and try to figure that out. I don't have the number on teleworking. I will tell you my own, every time I go to United States Attorney's offices and components of the department, is to encourage people to have their people come in. My view is we do not pay our prosecutors and investigators enough, and what they are coming to work not for the money, but for the public service and the sense of patriotism and teamwork that they get, and that the way to increase that sense of a team, and you must know that from the Navy, is for everybody to be there together and to develop unit cohesion. I think that's probably the right term, although maybe that's an Army term instead of a Navy term. And so
It's universal.
all right, I'm very much encouraging that. I will tell you the other side of the problem, and I'm getting this also from U.S. Attorney's offices, is the hiring market is difficult for us, and we have to be able to compete with some degree of flexibility in work style. If we tell everybody they have to come in right away, we're going to lose a bunch of people we don't want to lose. And so we've left that to each component in each U.S. Attorney's office to try to balance the needs in these two areas.
Thank you, General. And I'd like to close out my time by saying that in Ellis County, my home county, 200,000 people, I got back from the sheriff that they have held 79 of those criminals that we were talking about for 5,499 days in our county jail at a cost of $91 a day and $500,000. So it's extremely essential that SCAP not be cut, and I would hope that we could reconsider that program being cut. Thanks for your time, Mr. Chairman. I yield back the balance.
Chairman yields back. Mr. Tron.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 2 weeks ago, Secretary, we visited FCI Cumberland with Director Peters and spent the day touring the facility with the warden and her team, and get into a whole bunch of different issues, and it was very instructive. But one thing that struck us, besides the staffing issues and the restrictive housing issues we've touched upon already, is that the First Step Act contemplates folks getting a job, and the best way to get them that job was job training while they're incarcerated. And they had a beautiful facility there for teach them drywall, teach them how carpentry skills, teach them how to drive a forklift. These folks will go out, will get jobs immediately in today's today's full employment economy, and the likelihood of their recidivating drops dramatically. What my question is it was clear we don't have our facilities built for this type of an effort. The wait list to get into those training for drywall, for forklift, is significant. So what are you doing in the budget, or how do we do more in the budgets in the future? Because the more we can spend on our folks not to recidivate, the safer America is going to be. And we're going to give people a real second chance. But they don't have the physical infrastructure there, because the prisons were built for just containment, not about success when they leave prison.
I'll have to talk to the director about the facilities question. Obviously, that's a whole nother area of the budget, construction, which we haven't been talking about. I do know that for First Step Act implementation, we've asked for $409.5 million, and included in that is a considerable amount of vocational and workplace training. We obviously completely agree the best way to stop somebody from recidivating is if they have a real job. They have to go to work every day, and they have to have all the incentives to stay straight, and having a job are what's necessary for that.
So I encourage you to look at future budgets and talk to Director Peters and her team about that infrastructure piece, because they can't do their job without the right facilities, and they're outdated.
That guy needs to stop day
The question
drinking.
was, since we are short on
That's my only
facilities,
takeaway from this
tablets are a
exchange.
great opportunity to expand access to educational and reentry programming. With the BOP short-staffed and extremely long wait lists for most of their classes, being able to address the educational programs through a tablet is a lifeline to people trying to turn their lives around. The BOP awarded $77 million contract to roll out tablets in October of 2021. But as of today, 0 educational tablets are available. So what resources does the BOP need? how can we help you and help the BOP succeed?
Okay,
Give folks
on
a
the
real
other hand,
second
if he's
chance
talking about
to
making
get
sure
this
people have
tablets
access to
program rolled
technology,
out.
I can get behind that.
So my understanding, this is not a resources problem. It's BOP is engaged with a tablet, iPad vendor. I don't mean that it is an iPad, but I think of tablets as iPads. They're trying to work on various technology approvals that are required under
Eric
federal
Garland
law.
just broke the
Obviously,
hatch law.
tablets require Wi-Fi in order to download the information. Wi-Fi is a security risk in the prison.
Shine.
So I think this is just taking longer than the Bureau of Prisons had hoped, because
Don't they have
they
Mocha
have to,
Shine?
balance
They drink
security
Mocha Shine
concerns,
in Washington, I
and the
heard.
concerns
It's,
about improving
coffee
the
moonshine.
availability of vocational training.
And another reason not to have funding cuts, because by spending money, we're gonna be able to save money at the end of the day by folks not recidivating, creating a safer America, and
Well, I
cutting
love
back
job
on the
training
expenses of the
programs,
80 billion we spend on incarcerated
Bring 'em
people in this
on.
country. Instead, let's set them up for success. So we appreciate your efforts in this, and we thank Director Peters. I think she's a great
Fuck
choice.
yeah, gal. They all
Has
fucking
do
have
a fine job,
access
and
to iPads.
inherited
The
a
J6ers are actually getting
bit of a
treated
mess.
better than most of Gen
I
Pop.
yield back.
I'll tell her you said that.
Absolutely.
Gentleman yields back his time.
Oh, God, here's this
I'm
guy,
prepared
Mr.
to move,
Magoo,
Ms.
the head of the
Cartwright,
committee.
if you are that
What do I
way.
do now, son? What do I do? You speak into the fucking
That
microphone,
concludes
number
today's
one.
hearing. Mr. Attorney General, we thank you for your generous
Whew, it's
gift
been
of
a
time with us
morning,
today.
folks.
Thank you much. Without objection, all members will have 7 days to submit
I am
additional
going to go
written
ahead
questions
and
for the witness
end it
or
here
additional
for the
materials
morning.
for the
I
record.
might be back on later on. You
And
never
with that,
know. You just don't know with me.
hearing
I'm
is
very
adjourned.
unpredictable in that regard. But I love you all. Oh, wait, I love you, but then again, I don't. I mean, I love you in the parasocial sense of loving people who show up for me. And actually, you guys are the most, what an amazing chat we've had this morning with everyone, with Gal, Ted, David, Karen, Lee, Oomph, Marie, Ted, and Rip. Amazing. I'll see you guys later. Yeah, I might go on later on. I don't know. I do love you all, though. I don't care what anyone says. I love you. All right, be good.